Hello and welcome to Racing Incident, a Formula One and sometimes other motorsport series podcast in an American accent. I'm Anna, and I have a very special guest here tonight with us. Very excited to talk to him and introduce him to you in just a moment. But first, don't forget to please subscribe to us on YouTube if you're not already. Don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice if you're not already. And of course, I'm sure you are, but you want to know when the episodes come out. So subscribe and please rate and review us if you have a moment. We're trying to get to 100 ratings on Spotify, which sounds pathetically low, but help us out to get there, and then we'll move on from there. And we're trying to get to like 50 ratings on Apple Podcasts. If you listen there, please also write us a review if you have a chance, because that really helps. And of course, follow us on the socials. We are at racing_incident on Twitter and Instagram. So they're both the same, at racing_incident. And tell people about us. Tell them about how awesome the show is and that they should check it out. Okay, now that that is out of the way, let me introduce our wonderful guest. And his name is John Oreovicz. And John is hello.
Hello,
John, hello. John is an author, writer, most versatile motorsport journalist of his time. I think was
something close to that. Yeah,
was something we discussed before we started recording. It was all John's idea, and I said that I would be happy to give him that moniker. And
shameless self-promoter.
yeah, I mean, well, you have to be, right?
Quite true.
I think so. And now I know John so far mainly from reading his book Indy Split.
Hey, I recognize that.
Hey, yeah, I think you've seen that before, which is a great book, and I recommend people to check it out. But don't worry if you haven't read it, because I think this conversation is going to be approachable for everyone, whether you've read it or not. And don't worry if you're a primarily Formula One fan, like we are on the show, technically speaking. But I think there's a lot of interesting things to learn and talk about as regards IndyCar, and we're going to do that on this show. But first of all, John, can you go a bit into this in your book, but can you tell, our listeners and our viewers kind of, your origin story, so to speak? How did you get into covering motorsport, and how did that all happen?
It's appropriate for your podcast because my initial interest in racing was Formula One. When I was a kid, my parents were grad students at Penn State, and they were English majors as well. So they wanted me to read, and their tactic for getting me to read something that I seemed interested in is they got me a subscription to Road and Track magazine, which
Smart.
In the mid-'70s, Road and Track was as much track as it was road. And it's kind of returning to that in its modern guise as well. Anyway, the point of my story is that in the September 1975 issue, I opened it up and there's this picture of, and I still have the magazine in my den here. There's this beautiful color picture of Niki Lauda in the Ferrari 312T. You can actually see a 312T.
Nice.
And I, for whatever reason, having only read the Volkswagen road tests up to that point, I decided to read the race report of the Monaco Grand Prix. And Road and Track had an English gentleman named Rob Walker who wrote the Formula One reports in those days, and he was the heir to the Johnny Walker whiskey family. And his occupation on his passport was literally listed as gentleman. No, seriously, because that's what Rob Walker was.
That's not an occupation.
It was for Rob Walker.
Oh, right. And must be nice.
I suppose if you're the Johnny Walker heir, you can be a gentleman. but Rob was this English gentleman who had a legendary career in auto racing. He was the privateer owner who, when Sterling Moss won the first Formula One races for Lotus, it was in a Rob Walker private Lotus. It wasn't in a team Lotus, a green and yellow Lotus. It was in a blue and white Rob Walker Lotus. Anyway, I started reading the race reports, and I got very interested in Formula One. And this is 1975, the Lauda Championship year. And then I
Wow.
really started following it in 76, which was the Lauda James Hunt year. And of course, Nicky had his horrible accident at the Nürburgring that year. And I was 11 years old, and my outlet to it was the New York Times and things like that. But it drew me in. And when he came back at Monza, Wide World of Sports was there for the coverage, and CBS televised the Watkins Glen Grand Prix, the one that Hunt won over Scheckter with Lauda, a very distant third. And they had some kind of coverage of the finale in 76 as well. I mean, I'm sure it was just, 5 minutes of highlights on the CBS
Right.
Sports Spectacular or something. But
Was that all there was back then? There was no like.
So when Mario Andretti went back into Formula One in 76 full time, there became more interest. And the US Grand Prix was live in 76 from Watkins Glen. In 77, one of my early memories is, again, I'm 12 years old, but I remember watching Long Beach 77 live.
Oh, yeah.
And Lauda was on the pole, and the lights were, he couldn't see the lights from the grid. So he made a horrible start. He fell to third. And it was, by Formula One standards of any era, it was a great race with Jody Scheckter led like the first 76 laps. And then he had a slow puncture in a rear tire. Finally, Mario passed him 2-3 laps to go. Mario couldn't get by the whole time because the Lotus 78 was horribly slow on the straights. It was the first ground effect car, and they improved a lot of that on the 79 the following year. But he finally got by Scheckter, and then Lauda got by. So Mario won the Long Beach Grand Prix in 1977, and he's credited with saving the race because it was always on kind of shaky ground the first couple years. And when Mario won, it helped them secure a sponsorship with Toyota and some other things like that. And my interest just kind of grew from there. And at the same time, we had just moved from Pennsylvania to Indiana, and my 5th grade class in West Lafayette, Indiana, took a field trip to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I was just starting to get into the racing through road and track. But I mean, what really interested me there that year was James Garner, the actor, was driving the pace car.
Right.
They had this Buick Century pace car with this newfangled turbocharged V6 engine in it.
Wow.
That Buick was just unleashing on the public. And James Garner at the time was doing a television show called The Rockford Files, which wasn't my favorite television show. And so to be that close to Jim Rockford was, and I started going. My parents were English professors. They didn't have an interest in cars or racing or anything like that. But when they saw me starting to get interested, sometime in 1976, a Janet Guthrie car was on display at the Bryant Heating and Cooling store in Lafayette, Indiana. So I went, and the first race car I saw in person it wasn't the car that Janet Guthrie qualified the following year, but it was the blue Bryant car that she drove in 76. And then my first day at a racetrack was actually the day that Janet Guthrie qualified for the Indy 500, a very historic day.
Cool.
In 1977. And then I went to the race for the first time in 78. And I just started being a junkie. I discovered I could ride my bicycle across the bridge, and there was a newsstand over there that had something other than the Lafayette Journal and Courier. So I started getting Indianapolis Star, and I discovered Robin Miller, who was, I don't know if your audience is familiar with Robin, but Robin was the preeminent American auto racing journalist, not Formula One or not NASCAR, but just IndyCar and circle track racing and everything. And I discovered, my parents would go on these trips to England to do research. It's kind of very, very mysterious, for the dissertation that never got done. But
sure. Tale as old as time.
The souvenirs they would bring back for me were car magazines.
Oh, nice.
So I discovered Autosport and things like that. And it just kind of grew from there. And for me, the sad aspect of it all was my parents recognized when I was 15, it's like, oh, you need to be an auto racing journalist. And I somehow did nothing between 15 and 25 to do that. Which is, I blame myself for that. I worked at an auto parts company, and you know,
Well,
I guess
I think it all turned out okay, though, wouldn't you say?
I hope so. I got some living out of the way. But I went back. I decided, as much as anything, to satisfy my parents. I'd never finished my college degree when I started at Purdue, and I tried to go to Penn State and got homesick and came home. And I decided, well, if I'm going to be a journalist, I need a journalism degree. I learned certainly to be an auto racing journalist, that isn't necessarily true. Robin being a case in point. I mean, he proudly proclaimed about how he flunked out of Ball State. And, a lot of the greats, whether it's Gordon Kirby, he doesn't have a college education. Dennis Jenkinson had no education to
I mean,
speak
I don't
of.
think you need, to be quite honest,
Um,
I don't think you need it there are plenty of other areas of journalism that I don't think you need. I mean, I used to be a reporter actually, and I didn't go to journalism school, and I didn't, I think especially these days, and I mean, in the past too, there were ways people would, I mean, wasn't that how it was back in the day? I don't want to make it sound like it was 100 years ago. I'm trying to be nice.
here's the thing that I don't remember, because I started college in the 80s. I resumed college in the 90s, and I mopped up my degree in 2011.
Okay.
Because the next step of my story is I'm going to the Indianapolis campus of Indiana University. I'm trying to get this journalism degree, and I feel like I'm getting close. And so in February of 93, I wrote a letter to the Speedway, and it got in the right person's hands. And in my letter, I said, I'll make copies and empty waste baskets and get coffee for Robin Miller, whatever it takes. And as it happened, this guy, Bob Walters, had lunch with Robin that day. And I knew Robin a little bit at that time. And he said, Oreo, he's a great kid. He'll help you out. I didn't know that Robin drank exclusively Pepsi at that time. So that was yet to come. Anyway, they hired me for $1,200 to work the month of May in 1993 as a media center intern. And the reason
Nice.
that they found this big budget and the need for a second intern, there was a girl called Victoria Vanderwell from Iowa, who I'm still friends with after all these years. Hi, Vic. She'd already gotten the job, and I guess I was kind of overqualified. I don't know. I mean, but anyway, and the reason they needed someone else is because Nigel Mansell was racing Indy cars that year. He had come to a contract impasse with Williams. He didn't want Alain Prost as his teammate.
Mm-hmm.
And so he, in kind of a huff, stormed off to Indy cars, and he essentially traded places with Michael Andretti. Michael Andretti went to Europe and raced for McLaren.
Right.
And Nigel took over Michael Andretti's seat at Newman Haas in the best, most developed, the strongest car in the series. And Mansell brought with him this enormous amount of international media attention.
Right. I can imagine. At his first
probably
test, packed, right? In the media center.
At his first test in Phoenix, 200 or 300 journalists came over from Europe just to watch him test an IndyCar for the first time.
That is a lot.
It was nuts. The PR guy, a guy called Michael Knight, he resorted to using a bullhorn. All right, let's stay away from Nigel. So,
oh my God.
Anyway, during the month of May, the key for me was meeting a bunch of the key Formula One journalists. And those guys were my heroes. Nigel Roebuck, Morris Hamilton, Alan Henry, David Tremaine. Guys like that were my heroes growing up. And to meet Nigel Roebuck, I mean, that was, my mind was blown. And all those guys took me out to dinner one night at St. Elmo's Steakhouse. It's the legendary steakhouse here in Indianapolis. It was my first time I'd ever been there, and we're leaving. And the guy that organized the dinner was a fellow named John Zemansky, and he was the Chip Ganassi Racing PR guy at the time. And Ari Lyondike was driving for them, and he was fastest every day. So I got to know the PR guy pretty well. And we're walking out, and he points to a picture just like this on the wall, one of these little 8x10s. And it's a picture of Jim Clark in a Lotus at Indianapolis in 1965. And he says, "What's wrong with this picture? This is your initiation test." And I looked at the picture for a minute, and I said, "That car's on Goodyear tires, and it's supposed to be on Firestones." And he's like, "You're in." and just something stupid like that, just a stupid little bit of knowing that trivia, it garnered me the respect of these guys, because they're like, that kid knows his shit.
Right.
Yeah. So with Robin's help, with Gordon Kirby's help, by the time the next race in the kart series occurred at Milwaukee in 1993. I had a hard card. I didn't have any assignments or anything like that, but I had these guys out there saying, hey, if you got any extra work, throw it this kid's way. And I just started picking stuff up piecemeal here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I covered the series in 94 for Autocar magazine, which is an English magazine was owned by the same company as Autosport. And again, it was all on the Mansell Trail. But the key thing that happened in 94 is I met the guys from Reynard, Rick Gore and Adrian Reynard. And I spent the next couple of years doing a bit of low-key PR for them while still doing stuff for Autosport, Autocar. And then I had to get a real job at that point. So, and that was...
Well, it happens to us all.
it was more likely to happen in PR than journalism. And so I took a job as a PR man for a couple of years. And it was with Pac West Racing, which was kind of a newish team at the time. It was owned by a billionaire from Seattle named Bruce McCaw. And the year that I went to work there in 97, they had a couple of ex-Formula One guys. They had Mauricio Guzman and they had Mark Blundell. And I looked at this. I came in, being this know-it-all journalist. And I'm like, all right, here's a couple mid-pack F1 guys with, a no-name team and not the best Cosworth Honda engine. And, what's going to, no way. Well, they won 4 races. Mauricio was fast all year. He was unlucky to win only once. He finally won at Vancouver. And by that time, Mark had won twice. Mark won at Portland in what is still the closest road racing finish in an IndyCar race in history over Gilles de Ferran. Right there, that picture.
Yeah, nice.
And then Mark won again in Toronto. And then at the end of the year at the California 500 at Roger Penske's track. And then in 98, we had a year that was as bad as 97 was good because Mercedes Ilmor introduced a new engine that was a hand grenade. And I'd already decided at that point that I had my fill of PR. I didn't like the forum. I didn't like the hours. And so I got back into the press in 99, and that's where I've been since. I started out with
the more fun side.
Yeah, the company that was operating Cart's website hired me for a few years. I had a legitimate journalistic outlet through National Speed Sport News, but as you probably know, certainly in a niche industry like IndyCar racing or whatever, you have to have commercial work in addition to, and that's that it's a tightrope you got to walk. It's like you got to wear a PR hat when you're doing your commercial work. And, then you put on your journalism hat.
Right.
I thought I did that pretty well for a long time. Went through as a freelancer effectively, you go through a lot of ups and downs and everything. I worked for Robin Miller when he left ESPN in 2003 to go to work for the Speed Channel. He basically said, hire Oreo, and they did. And so from 2004 to 2017, I covered not just IndyCar racing, and this is where I joke about being America's most versatile, because I feel like I can competently cover NASCAR. I write the text for the NASCAR Cup Series yearbook right now, for example. I competently cover sports cars. I am one of the main contributors for IMSA's wire service. I can competently cover drag racing. I did that for ESPN. I can competently cover Formula One because it has been my passion since I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
And IndyCar just happened to be, when I grew up through the 80s and into the 90s, IndyCar racing became this fantastic blend of the best of Formula One and traditional American racing. Because the cars got increasingly closer to Formula One with higher technology.
Right.
You had you had Rick Mears and Al Unser Jr. and Al Unser Sr. and the Andrettis and you had all the American drivers and you had the oval tracks, but then all of a sudden you had Emerson Fittipaldi and Teo Fabi and Nigel Mansell and Arie Luyendyk and a bunch of great international guys as well. And you had a great mix of American and international talent. You had road courses, street courses, ovals, cars that looked great, sounded great. And then it's probably the lead into my book. One guy decided to drop a nuclear bomb on the whole thing.
Right. Well, so one of the things I wanted to ask is what made you want to write the book? How did that come about? Was that just something you've always wanted to do, or?
I mean, the flip answer is somebody had to do it, just because it was such a significant overarching storyline of IndyCar racing for the last
Right.
50 years or more.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is, you say Indy Split, and okay, it's got a picture of a kart car and an IRL car on the cover, but the Split didn't start in 1996.
Right, which I had no idea about. Now, I had very little. I had only a passing understanding of even the main split that people talk about, that that people
Right.
know about, kind of by osmosis, if you're around a lot of people who are into motorsport and IndyCar specifically. So I only knew about that. I didn't know, obviously, all the history and all that, and how you really classified it as almost like three splits.
So the 96 split happened because the 79 split never got satisfactory results.
Right. Yeah.
And the 79 split was a result of just stuff that lingered for 20 or 30 years. They didn't like it when Lotus and Cooper and the rear engine cars came in the 60s.
Right.
And the locals held a lot of resentment toward technology, toward foreigners, and unfortunately it's kind of a broader picture of America even today.
Yeah.
What was going on in Indianapolis, and the way that they were not world-minded and just open-minded and inclusive.
Yeah.
And so all this, to tell the story, you have to go back to the Holman family acquiring the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because shortly after they did that, there was the events of 1955 when 80 deaths at Le Mans, Alberto Ascari killed,
Right.
Bill Vukovich killed in the Indy 500. The AAA, American Automobile Association, which sanctioned racing, it pulled out of racing with immediate effect in 1955. It was just too much for them. They didn't want to be associated with the death and carnage and everything. And so
Can't blame them.
So Tony Holman, in addition to owning the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he was the organizer of what became United States Auto Club, which took over the sanction of a lot of major racing series, including the Champ cars, or whatever they were called in those days. They didn't generically become known as Indy cars until the 70s. And so Tony Holman wielded a lot of power. And as a result, Indianapolis wielded a lot of power, and it still does.
And still does, yeah. I think that's one of the most,
for worse.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think that's one of the most interesting things about this whole history in the book, and in general, and all the different splits and everything, is that a lot of the things that you read sometimes that are more historical don't necessarily have a ton of relevance sometimes to what's going on today. But this is the opposite of that. There's still a ton of, as we're going to get to, there's a ton of.
And if you want to get into some modern relevance, there are a lot of parallels between what happened in IndyCar racing and what is currently happening in professional golf with
right,
PGA and
exactly.
the LIV Tour. So.
Yeah. True. Yeah. It's
look, I mean, I'm IMS cup here.
Nice. I'm still, I have yet to go to a motor race of any kind, because also it's hard for me to get to things, because regular listeners know this, but my son is autistic and nonverbal, and it's I'm his primary caregiver, so it's difficult to be away for
That's
any
tough.
length of time. So I just live vicariously through other people.
Well, that's tough, and you're a hero for being there for your son.
Thank you. I don't think so. I think anyone would, who loves their child would care for them as best they could, hopefully.
Yeah. I'm trying
thank you.
with mine.
Yeah. I'm sure you're doing well. Are they into motorsport, or?
I have one son. He's about to turn 17. And
okay.
We just actually returned from Watkins Glen.
So yes, the answer is yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. His passion is actually airplanes. He wants to
there's
fly.
some similarities there.
Yep, he wants to fly, but he does love racing. And the neat thing is the last couple of years, as I've done the full IMSA tour, he has a lot of friends internationally who love sports car racing. And this is a great time for sports car racing right now. There's new cars, there's tons of excitement. And so
Cool.
he had cachet when he got to go to Sebring this year and see the World Endurance Championship in addition to the IMSA series.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had that's the other thing. I wish I had the time and the whatever to get into like lots of other racing series. Or I have a lot of friends who are into MotoGP. I have people who are into, World Superbikes, people who are into IMSA or into other sports car racing. And I'm like, I can't, how do you people do this? Do you not? I'm like, how are you doing this? How are you watching all this stuff? How are you, or a lot of it, they maybe not. So it's I don't know how people do it. I'm more of like the type of person where I have to. I would not be even if I'd had your life story, I probably would not be the world's most versatile motorsport journalist. Which I think that
You'd be at the best at what you chose, though.
That's right. Maybe it would be more like that. I tend to like to do more of which is weird because actually in life in general, I think I'm a bit of a dilettante. But anyway, when I get into something, I really get into it, and then sometimes 2 years later, then I do something else. Anyway, yeah, can you so talk to me a little bit about, and to listeners who may not have read the book, to how it was that the earlier problems led to the split that maybe more people know about. What was, how draw a line, from that to what happened later on.
Okay, so the 79 split happened because the team owners, predominantly Roger Penske, Dan Gurney. Dan Gurney was kind of the organizer, and then Roger Penske and Pat Patrick kind of took over as the leaders of the movement. But the team owners were very concerned in the late 70s that the USAC Champ Car Series lacked promotion, stability, direction, budget, everything. It was just the Indy 500 was great, but they were perfectly happy with the status quo of having the Indy 500 doing well, but not really caring about the rest of the series. And the team owners needed IndyCar racing to be a 12-month a year endeavor for, in what some people consider the golden era of the Indy 500, the 50s, the early 60s, the roadsters. The team owners were wealthy sportsmen. A classic example is Al Dean. He owned Dean Van Lines. And so he fielded a car in the Indy 500 and the other championship races. It was a much simpler time. You bought a car off the shelf. Everybody pretty much used the same engine. And Penske was one of the guys that changed that. Penske brought a higher level of presentation in. He brought engineers in. And so from a racing aspect, Penske really pushed things forward. And, as part of that, it increased the costs. And there was a lot of resentment from USAC and Indianapolis toward the way technology was coming in the 70s. They were having a hard time controlling the technical aspect of the sport. The team owners needed more promotion. They needed to be on TV. They needed some kind of return on their investment to get sponsors and everything. The CART group attempted to work with the USAC group and proposed taking over some of these duties while allowing USAC to continue doing the things that they were perceived as being good at.
Right.
There was a complete lack of cooperation from USAC. And what it finally came down to was the CART owners decided to stage their own. It was called the PPG IndyCar World Series, because by the late 70s, the cars that raced at Indianapolis were generically known as Indy cars. The series since the 70s no longer had dirt tracks, and so there wasn't, a front engine.
That was fascinating to me, by the way. I did not know that there were dirt tracks as late
and
as
still people that call for it to come back. But hey, get this, like in 19...
Wait, really?
Yeah. In 68 and 69, there were dirt tracks, road courses, and the Pikes Peak Hill Climb was a points paying round of the IndyCar Championship.
Wow.
So So
Why do
again, it
people
was
today want dirt tracks to come back? Just out of curiosity.
they want to harken it back to that.
They like it. They just like that type of
Yeah,
racing. Well,
yeah.
go to your local dirt track. I mean, I don't.
And unfortunately, as America's most versatile racing journalist, the dirt track stuff is the stuff that I'm weakest at. It's just never interested me.
Yeah.
I like occasionally going out once a year to the to see
Sure.
something, but it's never captivated me.
Well, that's why I don't really understand but even people who it captivates, like, so go to a dirt track and watch. Why does it have to be part of IndyCar? It's sort of like, to me, is I guess because everybody, I guess in motorsport especially, I'm learning that that people, whatever their pet favorite things are, or the things that they love, they want it to be part of everything, right?
Oh yeah,
Like, yeah,
So
they.
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
But from 79 to 81, CART staged a series of races, and USAC staged a series of races. CART expected to race at the Indy 500, and they did. They had to go to court to force their way in because USAC tried to prevent them in 1979. For a brief period in 1980, they came together, and then the Speedway hired a new guy called John Cooper as their president. He had ties to NASCAR. He was kind of a shadowy figure in the racing world, and he put the kibosh on the cooperation. He's like, we've got to go our own way. So from 82 to 95, CART operated the IndyCar World Series. The Indy 500 was operated by USAC, but it was a points-paying round of the IndyCar World Series.
Right.
In 1989, the heir to the Holman fortune, the male heir, I should say, to the Holman fortune, Anton Holman George, turned 30. Tony has 3 sisters. I think one of them might be younger, but I do specifically say the male heir because they could have chosen one of the sisters. They were not able to choose Tony's father because Tony's father was murdered by his mother's boyfriend in 1976.
Right.
But
that was an
we won't go
wrinkle.
into that. But anyway, they handed Tony the keys to the kingdom in 1989 when he turned 30, and he had all the old AJ Foyt and all the USAC hardliners, all the people that still had resentments from the 79 split and everything that happened up to that point. They're saying, you got to take control here. At the same time, he had Bill France from NASCAR saying, son, you got to take control here. He had Bernie Ecclestone from Formula One saying, son, you got to take control here. So Tony decided that he would take control. And he, in 1991, he flew down to, didn't even take the Holman jet. He flew down with Tony Bettenhausen, I believe, in Tony Bettenhausen's plane. And he presented a proposal to kind of change the governance of IndyCar racing, with the Speedway essentially taking over the power. And the CART team owners essentially said no, and it's he wasn't ready to be in that position. He had a little bit of a checkered past. He'd been known to have some drug problems. He tried to have his first wife committed. The whole Holman family, there's a little bit of a sordid side to it. It's almost like a trailer park family with a lot of money. It's sad. It's sad to say.
I feel like a lot of families with a lot of money are that way.
Tony's mom lived in squalor. She loved animals and was great to animals and everything, but she didn't care if there was dog shit everywhere.
Okay.
Anyway, that's kind of a tangent to this whole story.
That's okay.
But what you have is this very entitled 30-year-old guy, who felt that it was his role to be running a sport, and he went up against a lot of these successful businessmen, and they just shot him down, and they didn't respect Tony or his position, but he definitely didn't respect them. Right. And that is the theme of all this: a mutual lack
for disaster.
A mutual lack of respect between the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the competitors that support, create, make, sustain everything. The Indy 500 was nothing without those competitors. And so they said, fine, we'll bring in a new set of competitors. And they did. And that's what you had in the late 90s. You had the Indy Racing League of the late 90s with Butch Brickell and Jim Guthrie and Eddie Cheever, who never won a Formula One race, never won a kart race, but he is a IRL Indianapolis 500 champion. It's hard to take if if you just watched how it unfolded and you actually kind of knew what was happening. And yeah, I mean, Tony had a lot of grievances and he was right about a lot of stuff, but he went about it the wrong way. Tony eventually formed a team called Vision Racing, and one of his rationales was, well, we need more American participation. We need American sprint car drivers, and blah 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 blah. So, all right, Tony, instead of creating a whole series of races, why didn't you just start Vision Racing and run 3 or 4 cars for a bunch of these guys and bring them along and make them stars? But of course, it was the Indy 500 that makes stars, as they so often reminded us. How's that doing for Marcus Ericsson and people like that?
Yeah. Actually, that's something I was going to ask you back when you were talking about also these when you were working as the PR guy for this team that you thought wasn't going to amount to much.
Oh yeah.
Is that it's again? I know nothing compared to you, so it just seems to me, just even based on what I observed, that you have that kind of seems to happen quite a bit. Like, you've got people that come from F1.
Hey, Marcus Ericsson's a great example of it right now.
Exactly. Which is why when you mentioned him, I remembered.
Because it's sad, because if you look at the exchange, you look at the IndyCar guys, the established IndyCar guys that went to Formula One.
Right.
Montoya did well. Okay.
Yeah.
Villeneuve did well his first year.
Yeah.
Or first and second year, and then he just fell off a cliff, and he hasn't been seen since.
Yeah.
Cristiano D'Amato,
still respected, I would say.
He is, but Cristiano D'Amato did poorly. Zanardi, my God, Zanardi, the guy wiped the floor with the kart field, and this was a stacked field in 96, 97, 98, and this guy crushed them. And then he got in an uncompetitive Williams, and and he was a shell of himself.
Yeah.
And so the track
record, but the
of,
other
of
way,
these guys, Marcus Ericsson, Alex Rossi, Indy 500 champion, and
Roman Grosjean.
Well, he hasn't won a race yet, and I don't think.
Well, that's true. That's true. Really?
That dude hits the self-destruct button faster than anybody out there.
Let me tell you, that was a fun day on the podcast when I wasn't even watching IndyCar at all then, and even now I sometimes can't watch, but I keep track of what's going on, and I watch the highlights, and I try to watch the whole race, etc. But it was back when there was I think Graham Rahal got very angry at him and was like, I don't know if you probably remember this. He was like, well, we know his reputation from Formula One, and now he's doing the same thing over here. And it was hilarious, because of course he had Graham didn't tell a lie, really.
Yeah. And now that things aren't going so well, there's that element of desperation is kind of creeping back into his driving again.
I think he's a bit like that, even when there's not. As you said, he hits that self-destruct button, as you said. I think that's a good way of putting it.
King of the red mist.
Yeah, he really. Yeah, I know. Of course, you see that from other guys, but then they do win races and they win things. So.
Right.
You've got to be able to keep it in check.
Yeah.
Or let it out during practice or something, or not during the race.
I do hope that somebody in Formula One picks up this Palou kid, because he's really, really good.
I know.
He's 26. He's young enough, and the thing is you don't get in one of the top 2 or 3 cars, you're going nowhere.
Yeah, and I just don't. I sadly, I'm not sure I see it happening. Even though he is, kind of part of the whole McLaren whatever thing.
One of the 76 drivers they have signed.
Right. Well, they don't. But in general, there's it's just it's just so hard to get into Formula One. And I didn't even realize when the whole Colton Herta stuff was going on, if possibly him, going. I didn't realize even what a big deal that was in the IndyCar community until a year later, when and then seeing Colton tweet when there was the news about Brad Pitt's gonna race in this modified F2 car, and Colton was like, Brad Pitt got a super license before me.
That's great. Hey, here's a sad thing, Anna. Look at the last few American drivers in Formula One. You got Logan
Yeah.
Sargent, you got Rossi, you got Scott Speed. You
Yeah.
can go back to Eddie Cheever,
Yeah.
And what's the common denominator between all those guys? And that is that none of them raced in America before they got to Formula One. And
Mhm.
Formula One's all keen to have an American right now. But I'll tell you what,
Right.
Colton Herta, for as little publicity and as little impact as IndyCar has, Colton Herta still has 1,000 times more name recognition in the U.S. than Logan Sargent does.
Yeah. Oh,
You
sure.
know,
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
so that's it's a slippery
Yeah.
slope when you have that argument about, oh, you got to come up in the European ladder system and all that. They just, they haven't found the right American yet.
Yeah. No, they don't. And of course, I think that I think that for all their excitement and overdoing it, I think sometimes a bit of the fact that Formula One is now being embraced by Americans increasingly, I think that they still don't really understand America and Americans that well overall, because when you see like the way Logan is being presented, I'm like, is this what you think we want? Because it's not.
No, and Jenna Fryer wrote a story for the AP last week, and it's a drum I've been beating for quite some time, with this whole Drive to Survive phenomenon.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, absolutely. I believe that it's drawing American fans in.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's how
Americans love a good reality show.
Yeah, yeah.
And the problem is that what drew them in was that really nasty, contentious championship between Hamilton and Verstappen.
Yeah.
Which where you had, real antagonism between the two main players. And more so than that, you had the officials overstepping their boundaries.
Yeah.
Just, creating a lot of, two-sidedness and everything. And
I consider Lewis Hamilton an 8-time world champion personally.
I hear you.
Okay, cool.
I consider Paul Tracy an a 2002 Indy 500 winner. Then, so
okay.
I will counter your argument.
All right.
With
Well,
that
I don't know
statement.
if it's exactly okay. Fine.
It's pretty close.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
They both got cheated by the officials.
Okay.
By the sanctioning body. So
fair. Yeah. But you were saying you think that people are going to lose interest now that
absolutely, because for one thing, Verstappen winning all the races. All right, for whether I like the guy or not, and I really don't. Hamilton's perceived as a good guy. Mm-hmm. Verstappen's perceived as a bad guy. And the Americans don't want to see the bad guy win all the races. They want to see the good guy win all the races.
Some people love a heel, though.
Oh yeah, Robin Miller. His mantra was "hate is good."
There you go.
It's what drives these ratings. There has to be some sort of conflict.
Yes.
And the reason that I'm saying that this is going to be a flash in the pan for Formula One is that Formula One has a compelling championship once every 20 years, maybe once in a generation. And to make a direct comparison to the 21 season where the officials got involved, you have to go back past, Villeneuve and Schumacher in 97. You have to go past Senna and Prost in 89 and 90. You have to go all the way back to 1976 with James Hunt and Niki Lauda, with the officials manipulating race results. And again, that's nearly 50 years ago now. And that's what I mean, that you get that type of storm, perfect storm, literally once in a generation in Formula One. Don't get me wrong. I love the technical excellence. I love the fact that they are the finest and most capable racing cars in the world and everything. Mm-hmm. But that's what they built their brand on. So don't let the Americans fuck it up and try to turn it into entertainment.
I think that, counterpoint
to the true Formula One fan, they love it when the best driver and the best team dominates, right? Because that's a true demonstration of excellence. Right. When 9 guys win out of 12 races win because they're in the same car with essentially the same engine and the same tires that has been developed for 12 years. Right. It's not the same type. It's not the same kind of competition. It's a car race, but it's a very different kind of car race. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's why I think that it's still an unknown whether Formula One is going to remain, keep growing in the U.S. or not, or in general. I mean, and of course,
and it's like, we're premium. Our tickets cost $7,000.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other matter.
for people out there that are, that love gold-plated bathroom fixtures and things like that, that might be appealing to say, hey, I just blew $40,000 taking my family to Las Vegas for the Formula One race. But that's not gonna sit well with the average American race fan.
No, but there are, no, it's not something most people can afford. Definitely. I mean, it's Montreal is actually less expensive than all the US races.
If
So
I was an American Formula One fan, I've long said, go to Mexico City.
yeah, oh yeah, or
Go
there. Yeah.
somewhere else.
Right,
Go
right, for
to an
sure.
international Formula One race. Don't
Oh
go
yeah.
to a Formula One race in America,
Yeah, no.
because
Yeah.
it's not gonna be an authentic Grand Prix experience.
No, yeah. I mean, some people enjoy that, and that's fine. And see, I think that as long as people understand what that Formula One is a different sort of, I mean, because if you come, like I came from Drive to Survive partially, and so did lots of people I know. And again, I haven't done any scientific surveys, but people like me and lots of other people who went all in. Then I mean, I have a podcast now, so
Yeah.
who went all in. We understand that it's not um, a thrilling championship every year. We're not there for that, really. We're there for some people are there for the tech. Some people are there for the personalities and the dramas and funny things or whatever things that happen amongst all the personalities. Some people are there for the business aspect. They're interested in what's going on with the teams, the sponsors, the TV ratings, etc. Who's getting this deal? Who's getting that deal? Some people are interested in that stuff or all of the above.
Yeah.
I'm interested in a lot of the political things, and by political, I don't mean like what team owners beefing with someone else. I mean like actual politics, like the sports washing that goes on and things like that are things that I'm interested in. And
There's plenty of that Saudi money in F1.
yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, and the Saudi, Bahrain. There's a lot of, and just all of that stuff. And because actually, to me, it's almost like, I mean, I do feel morally conflicted sometimes following Formula One. I'll be honest.
I'll tell you what, I've followed the golf situation with PGA Tour and Live,
Right.
and as soon as the PGA Tour announced that they were
I
merging
was
or whatever
shocked.
they were doing, people were like, I'm never watching golf again.
Yeah, right.
Okay, U.S. Opens this week. Let's see you put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the trouble. That's the trouble, isn't it? Yeah. There were people. I know people were saying after 2021, some people that were saying they're never going to watch it again because of what happened. And some of them maybe aren't. I don't know. There could be people like that, but what else are you going to do if you want to see what is now? I don't necessarily believe that it's the pinnacle of motorsport, but that's obviously the branding. But what we were talking about with American drivers going there versus drivers coming here, I actually listened, and you mentioned Scott Speed, of course, with greatest race driver name of all time, um, other than Will Power, I guess. Oh, kitty cat.
That's Oscar.
Hi, Oscar.
Hi,
And
Oscar.
so cute. Okay, you guys have to, if you're listening, you have to check out the YouTube to see Oscar. Very cute. But so there I actually remember listening to Scott Speed he was on Beyond the Grid not that long ago on like their the official Formula One podcast. And uh and he said the thing that I know all American racing drivers don't like to or want to hear or don't believe is true, that he felt having raced in Europe and in the that he thought the level was higher in Europe. I mean, he didn't say it in so many words, but he was basically he basically felt that the level was higher. And do you think that's true? Do you think that's
I think it is at the lower levels. I think, if you compared Formula 3 to the old Formula Atlantic or Formula 2 to Indy Lights, I mean, let's face it, today's Indy cars aren't any faster than Formula 2 cars.
right?
So the answer is yes, there is. It's taken more seriously in Europe from top to bottom, from the team side, from the driver's side. it's definitely a more cutthroat environment at every level.
Oh
And
yeah, it's
that,
insane.
you know, there are some people who believe that you have to have that type of environment, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, Mario Andretti didn't have that environment when he went to Formula One after
Right.
being an IndyCar star, and I think one of the challenges for the IndyCar guys who go to Formula One is they're going from a much heavier car. It was heavier.
Yeah.
This is less of a valid argument now that a Formula
Right.
One car has a
Well, that's a whole
wheelbase longer.
problem in and of itself.
Oh, the wheelbase of a Formula One car is longer than a Suburban.
Yeah,
It's
it's insane.
unbelievable.
It's
Um,
insane. I'm
but
one of these people who there's a lot of people who are like, in fact, whenever you ask any of the Formula One people if the car should be made lighter, they're like, well, sure, but of course not at the risk of
yeah,
compromising safety, yada yada yada. But I actually I have a friend who's an engineer for one of the Formula One teams, and I actually used to have that same viewpoint. I was like, well, no, I mean safety is the most important, right? And it is, but he said that, well, with large cars that creates safety concerns as well, because then when you have crashes, they're worse, or when you have there it's and the car is so heavy, so you can
the
have
cars
more.
are enormous now. I
It's
mean,
ridiculous. It's nuts.
and I see
They do say they're going to try to make them lighter. I really hope that
yeah,
happens
and I see
with
the same thing. I love these new prototypes in IMSA, these
yeah.
LMDH cars, but they're just enormous race cars.
Okay,
And I
yeah,
know that
same thing.
they're putting in hybrid systems and all that, but the actual
Yeah.
combustion engine is tiny.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah, that's nuts. Yeah, it's a tough thing because I think a lot of people don't they don't understand that that they're the safety issue is not like totally cut and dry like you would have there,
right.
and it's ridiculous how yeah, they need to, hopefully they're gonna
The
size those
sport,
cars down.
no matter what form of racing you want to talk about, the sport is infinitely safer than it was. Uh, the big advance for driver safety came, at least with single seat cars. It came with the carbon fiber tub
Right.
that John Barnard pioneered with McLaren in the early '80s, which is what all cars are constructed of now. And of course, for oval racing, and this is where you have to give Tony George his absolute due, and that is Tony George and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway spearheaded the development of the safer barrier.
Ah, right,
Which
right,
is it's in
right,
universal use at every oval track in
right.
America right now. It
Yeah.
has saved dozens, if not hundreds, if not, you can't put a number on how many lives and serious injuries.
Oh
That
wow. Yeah.
the elusive, you know, quest for a soft wall.
Yeah.
And Tony George, for all you want to say about the role that he had in creating the IRL and what it did to IndyCar racing, the fact that he persevered as strongly as he did for the safer barrier, you cannot say enough positive things about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is amazing. That is something that actually that does as again primarily an F1 fan, but still I have like and as an American, I want IndyCar to do better, I guess, in the sense that I want more people to. I'm always trying to advertise it to people, I guess, to some degree, because especially if they, and sometimes it works. I have a friend who also is a even newer F1 fan than me, and so I told him that he should check out IndyCar, and then he watched the race in Detroit, and he said he enjoyed it. I don't know if he's going to keep watching, but anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, he was like, oh, it's like it's so exciting. I'm like, yeah. It's yeah, but again, I think it is important to remember, like and it was actually Fernando Alonso at some not too long ago. Of course, they've all been asked this season, or things like should the FIA do something about Red Bull, or should whatever, and I don't like Fernando Alonso, but he has been around a long time, and on this, I think he was right. He's like, this is the way F1 has always been. You always have
Yeah.
you'll have like this era of dominance
Yep.
for one team, and then it takes time and then this is the way it goes. And I so I always
It dates 50 years.
Exactly.
The single team dominance started in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just kind of like a natural thing, and I mean, you see it to some extent in other sports too, really. So I don't. It's not exactly the same, obviously, but
If you
you
don't
have
like
eras.
Alonso, you can
Yeah.
gleefully point out that he failed to qualify for the
I do know.
Indianapolis
I
500,
know. I know.
and he
Yeah.
was beaten by the lowest budget
Right. Right.
bottom team out there.
Which I
So
love. Yeah, I do. I do. I do think that's hilarious, and also how the first time Honda wouldn't give him an engine. I think that was one of the greatest things I ever heard. Also, because ironically,
he's back on good terms with them.
no, he is. I know, because
They're
they're gonna
reunited,
supply.
and it feels
They're
so
gonna be
good.
yeah. If he's still there, I mean, he'll be.
He will be.
Uh,
They need to gas Lance Stroll, but
yeah,
that'll
no,
never
they probably
happen.
no. I Lance is a whole other issue. That's a tough one. It's what's how far can a father's love extend is what we'll
Well,
find out
it's
eventually.
the most transparent checkbook racing transaction in history. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah,
Lawrence Stroll has literally bought every team that
I
his
know,
son
yeah,
drives for,
I know
from
it's tough.
Formula 3 on up.
Uh
It's
huh. Uh huh.
money, it's a gas.
Yeah, it is. It really is. That's the other thing that often troubles me. But anyway, that's motorsport, I guess. What um one of the things that I wanted to ask was actually that I understand this to some degree, but for maybe people listening or watching who don't, um, why are the financial realities so vastly different between? And I know some of the answer, but I want you to talk about it. Why it costs. Now the cost cap is 135 million in Formula One, and that's only since there's been a cost cap. Obviously, in the past, people used to spend, the top teams
3 or
above
4
way.
times that, yeah.
Right, exactly. And whereas an IndyCar, it's what, like, is it like 10 million to run a
You can be real
um
competitive.
yeah, you can be
You
very
could for $10
competitive.
million, you could be very competitive with a
Right.
two car team.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And
But the
so
thing
yeah.
about it is that number is a third of what it was 20 years ago, when
Oh, in IndyCar?
in the late 90s, when
Oh,
kart was at its peak, from
right.
say 93 to 98, 99, the budgets were 12 to 15 million dollars a car,
Hmm.
because drivers were getting paid big money. you know
Ah.
um, these days the top guys make $4 or $5 million. Mario was making that in the 70s and 80s.
Well,
and
yeah,
and
that's
and you
crazy.
want to wind up Mario Andretti, just ask him, hey Mario, what do you think about Scott Dixon's contract or whatever. you know I tell you, um in IndyCar in the 90s, it was a poor man's Formula One, but it was
Right.
close. I mean, the cars were
Yeah.
90% as capable. I mean, those
Mhm.
things in the late 90s, those were serious race cars. They had
Right.
1,000 horsepower and big grippy tires. And Dario Franchitti, they raced at Elkhart Lake last week, and everybody's making a big deal. It's like, oh, it's been repaved, it's going to be super fast and all that. Yeah, sure, it was 2.5 or 3 seconds faster than last year, but it was still a second slower than Dario Franchitti's track record in 1998, 25 years ago.
Wow, that's an amazing stat.
Yep,
That's
and the
incredible.
Schadenfreude king in me was like, all right, my boy Dario gets to keep one.
Yeah,
And that's one
yeah.
he's proud of too, because I'll tell you what, to average 146 miles an hour around that joint is impressive.
That is impressive. That's insane. Yeah. Wow. Good good for him.
So
But
what
yet
what the split did, the split took that money away. I
right,
mean,
right.
CART was sustaining, it was capable of attracting those budgets and having teams into the late 90s. And the split destabilized it, because
Yeah.
Indianapolis was out there saying, hey, come see the stars and the cars of the Indy 500. And they were,
Mhm.
shitbox Alaras and G Forces and, a bunch of drivers that nobody ever heard of. And they sounded like
Mm.
NASCAR cars instead of, it was like, "Rrr," instead of, yeah, which is, since the Cosworth came into IndyCar racing in the 70s, the high pitched turbo V8 whine was the sound.
Sure.
And so these cars were just offensive. Yeah, they were cheap, but they were agricultural. I mean, they were insulting race cars
Right,
compared
right.
to the kart cars of the time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the as the two series competed each other and tried to wear each other down, all they wore down was the sponsors and the money people. And they went to NASCAR, they went elsewhere. They just
right.
and you know,
yeah.
you look at the kart grid in the 90s where every car has Shell and Valvoline and Budweiser, and okay, cigarettes are gone now, but Marlboro,
Yeah.
Players, Cool, you know, Hollywood.
Well, in Formula One, they just give them other names.
Well, they're
Yeah, they're still
loopholing McLaren's here with Views, which is a nicotine delivery device.
I mean, Mission Winnow for Ferrari,
right,
basically, yeah. So,
but that's the legacy of the split. It went from teams being able to to justify and be able to have 100 people on staff and to run cars that have Kmart and Target and everything on the side. And not move that block.com and things like that. And that's the gee, that one hit home.
that took me a second.
The move that block.com 225 at New Hampshire in 2011. That was the willpower double bird race.
right.
So.
Sure.
but yeah, that's the point of it all. They sucked, they sucked the money out, and it hasn't recovered, and it won't recover. I mean, you look at it out there. Chip Ganassi's team, Roger Penske's team. It's not Marlboro or Pennzoil on the car all year long. And this is something that NASCAR encountered 10 or 15 years ago, where they had to change their model to multiple title sponsorships because they can't get one company to write a check for $25 million anymore. They've got to get 5 or 6 of them to write that $3 million check.
Right. Yeah.
And get their 4 races instead of 38,
It's tough. It's tough because I actually hear people who are F1 fans talk about even like these kind of minutia things of like because people who follow F1 are used to, like the same livery, the same so they get confused.
when the guys that were Reynard, they formed British American Racing in 2000 or 1999 it was. And they wanted to run 2 different liveries. They wanted to run a Lucky Strike car and a 555 car. That's a Japanese brand of cigarettes. And they wouldn't let them. And so what they did is they did a livery where they put 555 on one side of the car and Lucky Strike on the other with a zipper down the middle, just to kind of tweak the FIA. But it's come a long way since then.
Yeah. I mean, people. I mean, it's. I mean, even for like, I do know where people are coming from because it is confusing. Sometimes they're like, what car is that? They're like, well, this week it's this color.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, even Red Bull ran out a white car there, once or twice.
Well, that was a special, people do these special, liveries, right? But it'll be for like one race or maybe 2. And it's not because those are the people who are paying, that had nothing to do with a sponsor. In fact, that was,
but McLaren runs a different livery every race this year, it seems.
Yeah. Well, it's not every race, but it's, they do. But they do. Yeah. McLaren. It's interesting. I've always wanted to ask someone this who knows the answer. Is McLaren perceived a certain way in IndyCar, or are they just like any other team? Do you know what I mean?
It's not, it's not the real McLaren team. The real McLaren team that was the Formula One and IndyCar team, Sure. The McLaren they built their own cars. Roger Penske's first Indy 500 win was in a McLaren M16.
Yeah, the glory days.
The current McLaren IndyCar team, it's a marketing exercise.
Indeed.
It's spec car racing. IndyCar racing is spec car racing, and it's a different version of McLaren having a Formula 2 team. They're using it to spot talent. They're using it to attract sponsors. And if you can reel a sponsor into IndyCar, and the classic example of that is you see that Arrow appearing on the Formula 1 car at times. That's the big fish there.
Yeah.
You get a sponsor in for a couple $1 million in IndyCar. It's like, hey, come look at the glitz and glamour over here now for just $15 million. Look what we can give you. We can give you a rear wing end plate.
Oh my God, is that really how much it is?
I don't know.
Okay. That would be hilarious. I mean, I don't know. I have actually no idea. I'd have to do some
Zach
research.
Brown probably carries a rate card around with him.
I wouldn't be
Squad's
surprised.
25, front nose.
Oh my God, that man is a born salesman.
Yeah.
He's good at it. You can't argue with that.
Yep.
But something that I wanted to also kind of talk about is that one of the, as you already alluded to it, and as I've already learned from trying to straddle sometimes, the different fandoms, is that that there's this tension, right, between the people who are more interested in oval racing, let's say, versus people who are more
Oh yeah.
big tension.
And that was one of the,
and that was exactly
that was
right.
one of the root causes of the 96 split.
Exactly.
Because USAC experimented with road racing in the mid 60s, and then it went away. They completely redid everything in 71, and that's when they took away the dirt and they took away the road races, and they went to just like 12 oval races, and that's when the series started to tank in the first place. And they had Marlboro as the title sponsor for the series in 1971.
Wow.
And the only thing Marlboro cared about is that there was no other cigarette brand. And then the Parnelli team with Al Unser and Mario Andretti got Viceroy cigarettes to sponsor them. And Marlboro said, hey, we told you. USAC let Viceroy come in. And what was the last time you saw somebody smoking a Viceroy cigarette?
Couldn't tell you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Oval fans. So yeah, that was a big source of conflict in the 96 split, because the Indianapolis people, the USAC people, they still cling to the notion that sprint car racing, midget racing, and all that has a connection to the Indy 500, because it did up until the mid 60s. And in the mid 60s, Indy cars, the cars they raced at Indianapolis and on the other paved ovals and road courses and all that, went from front engine to rear engine. And the training ground that USAC had, the sprints and midget, remained front engine. And so there was a technical relevance that was lost. And the legacy of what happened, though, was that in the 60s, you had this generation that USAC produced of, AJ Foyt and Mario and Gordon Johncock and the Unser brothers. And just, you had this core group of stars that lasted from the mid 60s to the early 90s. And you can't name an IndyCar star that came out of USAC after that. Pancho Carter, don't get me wrong. Pancho Carter's a great driver, but he won a handful of IndyCar races. He never won USAC, the last time that they produced an IndyCar champion was 50 years ago. But there's still these fans around here that's like, oh yeah, we need the winner from Bloomington Speedway on the Indy 500 grid, And it's great that Brian Clausen did it. That one guy, that one guy had the desire to do it. It's great that Rich Vogler had the desire to do it in the 80s. But the fact is these guys don't want to do it. And as much as Randy Bernard or whoever was running IndyCar racing, or Mark Miles or Roger Penske or whoever, no matter how bad they want to force these circle track guys to race Indy cars, they don't want to do it. And it didn't become apparent until the late 80s, when Jeff Gordon, Kenny Irwin, Tony Stewart, all these guys in USAC, all of a sudden the light bulb went on. As soon as Jeff Gordon found success there, the light bulb went on. It's like, hey, we're out here in these front engine shit boxes going around dirt ovals. That's perfect training for NASCAR. It has nothing whatsoever to do with IndyCar racing.
Right.
And it's the truth.
Makes a lot more sense.
And it wasn't until the 90s, ironically, at the very moment that Tony George was trying to say, we've got to keep these guys in IndyCar racing, that the general public woke up to the fact that, hey, that ship sailed. Those guys are NASCAR drivers now.
Yeah.
And Tony Stewart came and he ran IndyCar for a couple of years. IRL, I should say.
Right.
Because he was the IRL's poster boy the first couple of years. And he won the championship the second year. But he got the hell out of there because he knew where the money was, and he did very well for himself.
Yeah. Well, yeah. probably the right call there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
I'll tell you what, Tony Stewart, he may have come up through USAC and all that, but he is one of those once in a generation talents that could drive anything. And for he's one of the few guys that you saw him. I mean, he got in that IRL car, and yeah, I mean those Menard cars had 100 more horsepower than anybody else, but he was fast immediately.
people say that about Scott McLaughlin. I feel like now, right? Isn't that what people say?
What do they
Like,
say about Scott McLaughlin?
well, that he might be so versatile that he could the fact that he's come and
Oh,
been
it's
as
amazing,
successful.
you know,
Yeah,
and that's a Penske product there. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's
Indeed.
all. You know, people bitch at Penske. Why don't you run an Indy Lights team? Why aren't you grooming talent in America? Well, he does fine getting it elsewhere.
I mean,
You
yeah,
know,
that's you can't argue.
he lets other people develop it, whether it's
Yep,
Joseph Newgarden or whatever.
yep, yeah,
But
yeah. Nothing wrong with
he
that.
only cares about winning. Penske does, and
Right.
he very rarely gets it wrong with a driver choice.
That works out pretty well, as it
McLaughlin's
seems. So yeah,
he's that guy's got a lot of talent.
yeah, absolutely.
He's entertaining as hell too, which
He
helps.
is. He is. I enjoy him, and of course, I'm a fan of Bus Bros. Obviously,
Yeah, there's a guy called Brian Simpson that works for those guys that does their social
right,
content,
right.
and he's just
Yeah.
I told him, I said I saw him
they
in Long Beach.
mentioned him like
I
maybe
said I
once
really like
or-
what you're doing because I'm a 58-year-old man and I'm not supposed to like this young people stuff, but so kudos.
That's when you know it's good.
Yeah.
When it speaks to people of all different ages and
To an
everything.
average IndyCar fan pushing 60.
Yeah. I think that's wow, that's high praise then, really. Yeah, I hope he really took that to heart and realized how big a deal that is. But the other thing that, of course, that we also have talked about is that again, there's all these tensions. So the tension of and this is what I'm interested in, especially as it relates to today. Is there still a tension in terms of, Speedway versus everyone else? Or not really?
No, that went away because the Holmans don't run the Speedway anymore.
Right.
Penske bought the Speedway.
Right.
And I would say that there is certainly more of a spirit of everyone within the series working together than there has been in many, many years.
True.
There's Jay Fry gets a lot of credit for kind of getting all the teams on the same page, and it's kind of tough. I mean, I think IndyCar is in a rough place right now, personally.
Yeah.
Let's
say more.
Well, Mr. Penske should know this more than anybody because he was part of the 79 split. Mm-hmm. And the reason the 79 split happened is because it was Indy 500 Uber alles, and the rest of the series got short shrift. And ever since he's taken over the Speedway, it's right back to 1977 again. I mean, admittedly, the Speedway, it had not had the investment from the Holman family in a number of years that it enjoyed for most of their ownership.
Yeah.
But and the Speedway itself is in spectacular shape right now.
Right.
It's the Speedway, but we're right back where we were in 1978. It's the rest of the series that needs the attention, and it's the rest of the series that the teams need to get to a point where they're not laying off people because there's a 6-month off season between because they're scared to run up against football. The rest of the series needs help. They need to make the sport a 12-month a year sport, and they have comprehensively failed at that. The closest they came was during the kart era, and they were doing great in the 90s until Tony decided he didn't like.
Can it ever happen? Like, to me, as just an outside observer, I don't think it can. Right?
No way.
Yeah,
it'll never happen. And they can say, oh, our ratings are up 5% over 2012. Well, guess what? The ratings are down 80% from 1995.
Right. Right.
Everybody, you can push statistics your own way, and they all, it's very insular, and they all like to pat themselves on the back and say, oh, yay, we had a full house for the Indy 500. Yeah. You're always going to have a full house for the Indy 500.
Right. I don't really understand why people even bring that up.
You tried to do to the Indy 500 in the 90s, and you still got 220,000 people out there on race day.
Yeah.
You can't kill it. It's the golden goose. Right. And one of my own personal issues is and it's it's a product of living in Indianapolis for 35 years. And it's just, there's no objectivity from the local media. It's just a cheer fest.
Right.
And when the
You
split
know
was happening in
what? It's
96,
not just the local media, I feel. Like,
well,
again, to
when
me, as I, I interact with a lot of fans, on social media and other stuff and whatever. And I, again, just as someone who got into motorsport through F1 first, and then got interested in IndyCar and other series and whatever. Also, it's very, very, jarring how there are people who are I don't think it's just the media. It's a lot of IndyCar fans. They talk about, and I understand what the Indy 500 is. I understand the meaning and the history and the, all that. Like, I get it. But I think it's, like you said, to the detriment of the rest of the series and to the detriment of the sport as a whole, that it is that way. And people,
it's disrespectful to the other races. It's
right.
And
Right. There's nothing like that in other, as far as I know. At least there's not other, there are races that are a bigger deal maybe than, but it's there has to be some way to maybe, but you don't think you could ever.
The hyperbole is just unbelievable. This is the greatest race course in the world. This is the greatest race in the world. Yeah. Well, I watched the 24 hours of Le Mans.
They got upset with F1 for you saw that whole thing, right? When they were that they were getting dangerously close to their trademark, the greatest spectacle.
I just watched the 24 hours of Le Mans a couple weeks ago, and there were 325,000 people there, and they were there for 4 or 5 days, not just for one day. Doesn't that make it a bigger race than the Indy 500?
Some would say.
I don't know. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, for sure. It's to me, it's just very, like, it's just distressing that a lot of people don't seem to see that, and the fact that there are, and I feel like you see also sometimes clearly that division more with European drivers versus American drivers. Like, I mean, of course, everyone wants to win the Indy 500, but it seems like a lot of people would rather win the Indy 500 than the championship, maybe even most.
No, and that's because they've hyped it that way forever.
Right.
Mario Andretti tells the story. He's like, I finished third in the 65 Indy 500. I'm the rookie of the year. And then I went on and I won the national championship that year as a rookie.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He goes on the Johnny Carson show at the end of the season. He's not introduced as the USAC national champion. He's introduced as the Indy 500 rookie of the year.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And Mario is one of the people that this, it grates on him,
Mm-hmm.
And Mario,
me too.
He loves the Indy 500. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, of course.
But,
of course.
When they were going around the 90s saying, we make the stars, or we make the stars, not the Indy 500 makes the stars. The stars don't make the Indy 500. No, it's both. You have to have both.
Exactly.
It's a two-way street. And again, it hasn't been that two-way street because of the lack of respect between the Speedway and its competitors.
Yeah,
for so long.
It's frustrating to me as I'm interested in, I'm always really interested in a lot of the marketing and the whatever other stuff like that. It interests me how racing series and teams and whoever goes about doing all these types of things. And when I look at IndyCar, it's just like there's this it seems like, I mean, the Speedway is the power center.
It is.
And all the people, like there's often talk amongst fans, or even like the drivers will talk, that in the days when, I mean, now they say things are getting better allegedly, but like, in terms of social media, other marketing stuff, whatever, they're like,
get them off the record and they'll tell you a different story.
No, I know. No, but I mean, even on the record, I mean, well, now he's not in IndyCar anymore, but Connor Daly used to like weekly on his podcast be like, I mean, he would always say like good things, but there was, there were also
I think the key is you've got to go to a race. And I think if you can get somebody to go to a race and then get him to tune in and watch, and that's the key for him, that you've got to get somebody that's seen it once, that will make the commitment to tune in every couple of weeks and watch.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think one of their problems is their broadcast. I think it's just awful.
It's not good. Yeah, I agree.
It just seems like a desperate attempt to sell a product, and Husky chocolate, Chevrolet. Yeah, it's just like it's just
Oh my God,
It's
that kills me.
the sport is commercial enough as it is,
I
and
can't handle
to
it.
have what
But
should
that's
be,
like an American thing, isn't that? Isn't NASCAR the same, or
it
no?
is, and it's
Yeah.
a lot of it's an NBC thing because I watched the
Ah.
end of last night's NASCAR race, and Dale Jr. and Jeff Burton and all of them are just like, oh, Ross Chastain's the greatest race car driver of all time, and this guy's a serious championship threat, and 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 they this this trend has been going on for a long time. And what hurt IndyCar this year is Paul Tracy's out. And Paul
Right.
Tracy was the voice of reason in there. He was the one guy that could say, hey, Connor Daly's doing a bad job or whoever. You know,
Right.
James
Right.
Hinchcliffe's not going to say anything bad about anybody.
No,
Townsend Bell's
no,
not going to say anything bad
no.
about anybody.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all everything's great, everything's positive, everything's wonderful. Well,
Yeah, that's one
just
thing about
they've just
Formula One commentary is the complete opposite. I mean, as far as
I've just they've just lost
yeah.
the concept of the fact that the announcers are supposed to be objective, commentators
Right, right.
as
Yeah.
opposed
Yeah.
to people selling hot chocolate that's not available in the US. And,
That's right. It's not even available here.
and the sheer commercialism of it is just it's insulting.
It's
It's
so bad. Do you know what? It's like that's how you know you're talking to. I remember seeing one of those. After I don't remember if it was after the race or if it was after the qualifying or what, but I remember seeing Marcus Armstrong talking to the reporters or whatever, some reporter, and I was like, I actually don't like him either, but I was like, praise God! Like when you have somebody who comes from Europe, he did not mention a single sponsor.
he hasn't they haven't whipped it into him yet.
I guess not. I guess not because he's I guess technically part time since he's not doing the ovals. But
Right.
I was like, please, can we get
All right,
the
so
memo out to everyone else? I can't handle it.
all right, so you don't like Armstrong and you do like Screwy Louis
Well,
Hamilton. And
I'm not sure if I like him or don't like him. He seems a bit.
who do you like in IndyCar?
Who do I like in IndyCar?
Yeah.
I like Joseph.
All right.
I
You
like.
like McLaughlin? You said that earlier.
Yeah, I do. Although I mean, even when I say I do like Joseph and Scott, they are. I mean, for me, a lot of. Well, this will sound stupid because it describes so many racing drivers, but I don't like when they're too, broy,
Oh yeah,
and that's the
yeah.
case for a lot of drivers. Obviously, I don't. There's some things I can't. I don't listen to too many podcasts, for example, or things where it's all men. There are some that I
Yeah.
listen to just because you have to, because there's
Well,
some people. When
you've mentioned the guy who's the broest of all the bros out there.
Who?
A man who no longer is in IndyCar. Connor.
Oh, right. Yeah. And that's, I had trouble listening to his podcast.
So
Yeah.
I like the Bus Brothers but I don't the Connor Daly shtick I don't care for at all.
Yeah, no, me neither. But
So
he's a fan favorite, I guess.
so they say.
So
Certainly not reflected in their television numbers or anything.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, I like Colton. I've always liked Colton before I only knew him at first through like the whole F1 will he or won't he thing. But I like that he's so like laid back and normal and is not and I guess it's because he's from California or whatever the case may be, but he's just like very normal. I don't know if I like Kyle or not, but he seems like a candidate for someone I could like because he seems also very like normal and I think I don't know.
Okay.
And then but I love a good story like Augustin Canapino. I love
He's doing a great job over here.
I mean, I think that stuff like that is fantastic. I love when things like
that goes back to an
happen.
argument earlier. It's like, all right, what does it say about IndyCar when a guy can step into a back of the lowest budget team in the series,
right?
And he's faster than Connor Daly.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta be honest here, like, because I don't think there's anybody listening who's a Connor Daly fan. I highly, highly, highly doubt it. I mean, when I saw the news, I was like, okay, and like this, you can, people acted like it was like, I'm like, in F1, you can get dropped for like way less than that. Like it's, or another, I mean,
if
you
it was
have
based
to,
on performance, it was a matter of what took so long.
right. So yeah, whatever. Um, but and that's the other. I mean, there is I hear people say things like that too. People are like, well, this is why people have, whether it's a real issue, whether it's a real thing or not, that they will say that, well, the standard is higher. I mean, Logan Sargent, I've heard him talk about, even though he came up the European ladder and whatever, but that's something like they've asked him, like, what's how are you finding Formula One, whatever, how are you? And I found it comical when I heard him answer something to the effect of like, well, it's just that you have to perform every time, every session, every go, you have to. I was like, what did you?
What makes that different from any other series?
I mean, right, but like, I was all like, what did you expect? Like, I was like, well, I mean, I hate to tell you, but if you weren't doing that if you weren't doing that in F2 or F3, like maybe you don't belong here, which, and I don't really think maybe he does, but we'll see. Time will tell, I guess, but it's not looking great. I also, people think that, people will talk, they're like, oh, Americans, getting, you must be so excited that there's an American driver. I'm like,
And this goes back to the point that I made earlier. No American racing fan
right.
had ever heard of this guy before.
Yeah.
I mean, he has never competed in America.
Right. Yeah, but it's so him and Kyle Kirkwood are friends, as I'm sure you know. They and Kyle did, back when I was still listening to Connor's podcast. Kyle was on there one time, and he talked about like him and Logan went out or whatever. And now that he's a Formula One driver, there's definitely a lot of attention. And that's the effect of Formula One. I mean, that's just the way it is,
Yep.
It's amazing to see from a fan perspective. It's like sometimes like Will Power likes our Instagram posts or something like that, or that doesn't happen with with Formula One drivers. I mean,
you're not getting Nick DeVries liking your posts.
Well, that would be one that way would be realistic. but yeah, I mean, that frustrates me so much. That whole thing about that again, because of the way the Indy 500 has been built up and marketed and everything. And that, I mean, I feel like there's got to be some way that it could still maintain its, importance and supremacy and all this while still building up the rest of the races and the other parts of the series. But I don't know if there's a will for that, right? It doesn't seem like there's a will for that.
There's just not a desire. They
exactly.
It's just, I guess it's a 75-year history now of, putting all your eggs in one basket, and it doesn't matter who the management is. It seems we're going to milk this cow until it's dry.
Yeah. It's frustrating because and then you hear people talk about like, why didn't anyone like, again, I remember Connor and his podcast being like, when they were at St. Petersburg this season, at the, and he's like, he was walking to the track or something, or I don't know, he was right. And there were like people at a sports bar watching the Formula One race or something. Their race is going on literally like down the street,
right?
And he's talking about it, and I'm like, it boggles the mind how there's this like level of, shock or surprise sometimes among people. Why is it like that? And it's like, well, look, there.
I think it's common.
Not that hard.
I think it's common among racing fans to have their favorite and to kind of, poo-poo the other forms of racing.
Right.
IndyCar fans like, oh, NASCAR.
Right.
Yes, I think that, they ran a NASCAR Cup car at Le Mans this year, and
right.
I think that the key to come out of that was the level of, the technology of the car is not the same as it is.
Sure.
But the level of the engineering capability to work on that more basic car is every bit as good as it is in IndyCar, or Formula One, or anywhere else.
Yeah, I like it went pretty well. It seems like, right? They and they finished the race, and
Yeah,
so
they had to change the gearbox. I mean, it was an
yeah,
exhibition entry, and normally, if your
yeah,
gearbox
yeah,
took a
of
dump, you wouldn't
course,
be able to change
yeah,
it. But because it
right,
wasn't
right,
competing against any other,
right. Because you
you
can't
know,
compete against anyone when you're the only.
I think it was really good for
Yeah,
NASCAR. It was good for Indy
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
the interest in sports car racing, I
yeah.
saw, some Sports Business Journal graphic or something. It was up like 130% this year.
Oh, interesting,
So yeah,
interesting.
it's
Yeah.
it's my plug. It's a golden era for sports car racing.
All
Get on the
right.
bandwagon now.
All right. All right. You heard it here first. Or I guess not if you've been saying it a lot already. But yeah, I just it's sad. And then I think I don't know if it's because of that a lot of fans I feel like also have that attitude of, like you were talking about, like the announcers and the people, a lot of fans will not hear anything negative
Oh
about
yeah,
IndyCar.
yeah,
They will not hear it. They la 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 la,
yeah. Oh, that's Lewis
like
Hamilton
it's
fan too. Seriously.
Oh, come on, that's not true. As a Lewis fan, I don't think that's true for everyone, but of course you have in every fandom there's people who are a certain way. But then you have, I think, lots of other kinds of people.
LH44, baby.
Team LH. Hey, there's nothing wrong with having, your favorites.
No, there's not.
There's
Hey,
nothing wrong with
I'm
that.
team David Gilmour, so.
Okay. And it's frustrating because it's like I've actually gotten into like not fights with people, but like where I say that, well, this IndyCar should do this or they're not doing this well, and people are like, no, it's a lot
No.
better than it used to be, and well, I'm like, well, that's not a path to success.
IndyCar fan, you're right. It is kind of a special breed that it's, thou shalt not speak evil of our beloved
Right,
series, or
right.
especially the
It's
Indy
tough.
500. And it's the Indy 500 even more so than IndyCar
Well,
itself,
yeah,
because,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the big thing about the 500 and the Speedway is that, and they have created place fans as opposed to race
Mhm.
fans. They've created Indy 500
Right.
fans who aren't necessarily IndyCar fans, because
Right.
if they got a
Right.
2.9, which they're bragging about their 2.9 rating for the Indy
Yeah.
500, it was an
Yeah.
8.4 in 1995. So they're bragging about
Wow.
their 2.9, and
Oh,
it's like, all
man.
right, why are 2.9, or 4 million or whatever the number is? Then how come you're
Yeah.
getting a 0.42 for Detroit
Yeah. Yeah.
or whatever? Come on. This is what I mean. You've got to,
Yeah.
and that's what these sponsors look at. They look at
Place
that
fans,
TV
not
number.
race
No,
fans. That's
it's exactly,
exactly it. That's
yeah.
exactly it. Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right.
They are
And that,
IMS fans
yeah.
as opposed to IndyCar fans.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Which,
I mean, more power to the Speedway for doing that. They've done
sure,
very well,
sure.
but
Right,
it's
right.
a lot of times over the last 60 years or whatever, what's good for the Speedway is not necessarily good for the sport.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's so you don't think it'll change at all with, I mean, Penske is, they're also a team. So
No,
they're
because I mean, the thing about Penske is there's more of a leadership by fear. People,
right.
it's stronger leadership. People know they need to get in line and
Yeah.
say all the right message points and all that.
Mhm.
It's a different style of management, and
Yeah.
Penske's great at presentation. Everything looks beautiful. It's shiny. It's polished. But he's rarely had to sell a product, whether it's truck
Mm,
leasing, whether it's anything else. And they're, even the sponsors,
yeah.
whether it's Marlboro, whoever, they came to him, not the other way.
Right.
And so sometimes I just don't think they know what to do when they actually have to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that doesn't bode well for the future, does it?
The we've seen, you can't kill the Indy 500s.
Right.
Indy
No, of
500,
course. Of
two world
course. Yeah.
wars, two splits,
Yeah, no,
whatever.
no,
You
that's
can't kill the
yeah.
Indy 500.
Yeah.
But if they kill the series, then you open up that possibility.
Yeah.
And there's all these people
Yeah.
saying, well, bring the Indy 500 back as just a free for all. And, you can bring a stock block V8 or whatever. And that's not going to happen.
Oh my god.
You know,
That would be insane.
So
That's
yeah.
it's true. It's I remember it was a funny moment in the press conference in F1 after Monaco. I don't know if you saw, but they Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso were kind of like they were asking Esteban Ocon a question, who got a surprise P3, and Max was like to Fernando, he's like, it's what time? They're like we're gonna miss the start of the Indy 500. And because they were interested in watching it, even though whenever F1 drivers get asked if they are going to go do it,
Nobody wants to run an oval. Nobody
no,
wants to go into the wall at
they're
220.
scared to death. They're scared to death,
No.
even though there's all this safety now.
Well, they haven't killed it. I mean, until the French kid went under the tractor in Japan a couple years ago, they hadn't killed anybody since '94.
Yeah.
And people still die in IndyCar racing for, unfortunately.
Right. True.
They haven't in God, what was the last
Yeah.
one? Was it Justin?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, but it's still, the point is it still happens.
Right. Yeah. It's
And that's,
but yeah, no, people, I mean, I get it. I mean, I would be I I wouldn't want to do it.
yeah. No, it's a very, very specific type of skill set and bravery to go around that place. It really is.
Yeah, for sure.
And some guys adapt to it, and some guys don't.
Yeah. It's I mean,
it's the world's fastest 4-corner road course, and they all look the same, but they're all a little different. And it's
I know, I've heard. I find that fascinating.
In terms of car setup and everything, it is an extremely fast 4-cornered road course.
Yeah. I find that fascinating that there's I don't even know what the differences are or anything like that. But I remember when I saw someone talking about that, I was like, oh, really? Because they all look the same, right? But it's there's that's fascinating. And yeah, there's but that's like I've here, tell me if you think and then we're gonna probably start wrapping up, but tell me if you think this is a stupid idea, because people are always talking about, like, IndyCar fans and drivers and other people are always angry at the fact that F1 gets so much attention, and of course they don't, and yada yada, and that especially now with the U.S. Heightened interest and all that, and they're like, hey, we've been here the whole time. But
yeah, and you're running the same car you ran in 2012.
Yeah, there's that.
Oh, it has new body work and a windshield.
A windshield.
Arrow screen, excuse me.
No, but that's funny. That's funny. I like that. I do. That is something I run into when I'm like trying to tell people to get into, people who are interested, especially in engineering and tech. You try to get them an IndyCar. They're like, I'm not interested in watching those cars.
No, there's spec cars. It's a 12-year-old engine formula. It's a 12-year-old chassis, and unfortunately, the car people aren't interested in it. And you can say, oh, it's the closest, most competitive race. Well, NASCAR is actually closer and more competitive. But, yes, it's closer and more competitive than Formula One. But there's a reason for it. All the cars are the same. All the cars have been developed for years, It's you can't. And that's silly. Why, and of course, race fan, they want 30 cars and a, pack racing to the photo finish and all that. I have more respect when some guy goes out like Alex Palou does and wins an IndyCar race by 20 seconds when he's racing the same car against everybody else.
Yeah, that's actually insane.
Because that's a true demonstration of greatness.
That's right.
What if they would, what are you there to see? Are you there to see a photo finish, or are you there to see the best driver that day?
Yeah, that's actually incredible. I really like him too. I forgot to mention, because he's like when I first was getting interested in IndyCar, I thought I liked Pato. I have changed my mind.
Yeah, he's a bit of a punk, and his mentality.
Oh my God.
He's too much of a hothead.
He's the IndyCar Max Verstappen, and there's
without all the talent, but
I guess I don't know. I mean, he's
got quick hands and everything,
talented, but he's crazy. Yeah, and who talks? I thought that was anti-IndyCar. I was told that you do not talk that way. That I'm going to put him in the wall. Basically like that. I was told that is how come IndyCar drivers are able to race on ovals, because you have to trust the other guys. That they're. Pato's
Well,
saying,
even
"Don't trust
Scott.
me."
Well, yeah, and of course you saw Dixon's response to that at Long Beach. Is that's the
Yeah,
way he wants to
yeah.
race. He'll get a little
Right,
taste of it
right.
himself the next time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
but like, well, we'll see how that goes. I can tell you in F1, when it happens to Max, it doesn't work at all because he thinks that only he's allowed to do those things. But anyway, that's why I feel like with Pato.
Lewis is better with dirty moves than Max is. Max is a little bit rougher around the edges. Lewis has perfected the dirty driving, and he gets away with it.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. That's a perspective. That's a perspective.
There's a lot of
But
blame to go on both of those guys.
no, of course. Where was I going with this? Oh, Pato. I mean, yeah, it's um, I think that he. I don't know how he thinks he's ever going to win a championship or a 500 or
His
if he keeps going like
the
this.
move he tried to make on Ericsson in Indy 500 was just stupid. That was a 0% move.
There was no point. And he said, I don't know if he's changed his mind. I don't think he has. I mean, I don't know.
No.
But days after, he was like, I don't regret anything. I was like, really? Really? You don't? You could have finished whatever was he, third or you don't regret anything? Okay. I mean, that's why you're not going to win a championship or possibly or a 5. That's okay. Cool. He's got a really cute puppy though. So,
that's cool.
That's you haven't seen his puppy?
No.
Oh,
I got
okay.
Oscar's back though. Oscar's cute.
Oh, Oscar. Yeah, no, Pato, you have to check out Pato's
I will
puppy.
try to check it out. I watched
I'll
watched
send you
100 Days to Indy, and I don't remember the dog.
Oh,
The
I don't know
dog
if they had.
there.
I don't think he was in there. Yeah, I don't think he was in there. What did you think of 100 Days to Indy, by the way?
Yeah, it was all right. I mean,
yeah, it was so.
Yeah. I went into it with the Sylvester Stallone movie Driven as my benchmark, and it did exceed that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a high bar.
A very low bar. I had very low expectations, so it met my very low expectations. The best thing I can say is it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah,
it had some moments. I thought it was kind of interesting to learn about like McLaughlin's parents and his wife's parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the part I actually.
So
really
I enjoyed that stuff. I thought that when they did the last episode, for starters, they needed to devote a lot more time on the 500.
Yeah,
it needed 2 hours, but
right.
They only everything I said, about the Indy 500 is the greatest. They totally ramped up the Indy 500 cheese in the last episode, and I thought that kind of devalued it a bit.
Yeah, I agree. It, I mean, even of course, again, the whole concept, 100 Days to Indy, like this is what I mean. Again, that this is.
I'm glad they got a result that worked well for their program.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If Simon Pagenaud wins, what's happening?
Right, that's not as exciting. Yeah. That's not as nice. Yeah, that would be less of a good ending.
So good for Joseph. I personally, I only root for Scott Dixon at the Indy 500 because, and it's what you talked about earlier, that people.
I like him too, of course.
People
he's the GOAT.
Yeah,
IndyCar,
but people in America put a greater value on an Indy 500 win than they do on a championship.
Right.
And unless you win multiple Indy 500s, you're nothing. And even Mario Andretti gets that. The guy is arguably the greatest race car driver of all time.
Right.
But oh shit, he only won Indy once. AJ Foyt won it 4 times. He's 4 times the driver. Mario must be. Until Scott Dixon wins another Indy 500, he will not get the respect that he deserves, and that's tragic.
Insane to me.
That is tragic, but that's the result of this cult that they've built around the Indy 500.
It is a cult. It's a problem. It's a real problem.
And you wonder why I'm off sides with these people.
No, I understand. I'm understanding more and more. Yeah. But anyway, we should probably start wrapping up, even though I could talk to you for like 5 more hours, and maybe we'll do it another time.
Do another
But
episode. I've had a long day. I drove home from Watkins Glen today, so
oh, I know that's right. That's right. I know someone who was at that race.
and I'll tell
Actually,
you
do you know
what.
what? The person who I know who was at that race is the person who recommended your book to me.
Oh, no kidding. And who's that, may I
Yeah.
ask?
Well, now that I think about it, I guess I don't know his name. He's a marshal and he likes to stay anonymous on
Okay, that's cool.
social. Yeah, but
Well,
he's
I'm happy to hear it got some positive word of mouth. So
yeah,
that's
he's
awesome.
marshaled for I guess a long time. Like he's done he and we first started chatting when I think it was the day that I got, let's just say most IndyCar fans probably don't like me, or at least a lot of them don't, because I I made a whole thing out of the IndyCar ministry and the invocation and I mean I again I know this is an American motorsport thing, but I find that really off-putting, and I think that that's probably I don't think I'm the only one. There's got to be other fans, and I did hear from some people who were like, "Yeah, I don't like that either."
I'm
But
not a religious person, so
yeah, I mean,
I'm just
well, I
it's
don't think it matters if you are a religious person or not. It's not the issue of it's religious. It's that it's only one religion that's
yeah,
being represented. So
yeah.
that's really the issue. But anyway,
Hey, they do the Canadian national anthem in races in Michigan. So there's that.
right. Yeah. So, it is what it is. But yeah. So he's the one that recommended you, and he was there as a spectator at Watkins Glen, which
Okay.
I think he really enjoyed because usually he's marshaling. So that was a
Nice.
nice change of pace. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. He was marshaling at the Montreal Formula One race. And I was following a lot of his
Okay.
funny comments, and yeah, he had it was the insight of that there was at one point when there was a what seemed like a yellow flag for like 30 seconds, and he said he watched it later, and he said and Martin Brundle was really confused what was going on, and then it went green, and he's like, I can tell you there was a suicidal badger or something, or
Oh,
that ran out.
I think I saw a picture of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I got Montreal. There, it's a lot of wildlife there. Apparently, it's nuts. Um, but where can if people listen to this and we're like, this John guy is really cool.
Ha.
I want to I want to follow his work and what he's doing and what he's up to. Where should people go?
Well, if you want to find my current work, I do a lot of the content for IMSA. Um, it's posted on their website and it's
Mhm.
distributed to media lists, fan lists, and things like that. So IMSA.com is one place to find my musings on sports car racing. I do have a website, but I'm not much of a self motivator when it comes to just typing something for the sake of
Sure,
typing something.
sure.
There's got to be an assignment or a paycheck or something on the line.
Can't blame you there.
I know I should do better, but you can go to johnoreovicz.com. It's OREO like the cookie, VICZ. Um, yeah, and you can always just, I'm pretty easy to find on social media. If you want an
Mhm.
autographed copy of any of my books, just reach out to me. I do PayPal, I do Venmo, and all that stuff,
Nice.
and I generally move stuff for a discounted rate too to people that say nice things about me.
Oh, well, I'm sorry I paid full price for this book in that case. But I guess I'm glad for you.
Well, my son's education fund, thanks you.
You're very welcome. Education is very important, so I feel good about that. I feel positive about that contribution that I've
So I'm
made.
in Vintage Motorsport magazine occasionally. Uh,
Okay,
yeah, you can get my book at
cool.
Amazon
Right,
or
right.
octanepress.com. They're the
Yeah.
publishers.
Or bookshop.org
I
if you
imagine they
want
do.
to.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
Thank you for
do.
the tip there. It's
If people don't know, if you don't want to, if you want to buy from someone less evil, bookshop is it basically they help out independent bookstores, but it's like an Amazon, but I mean only books, obviously,
Sure.
not other things. But I try to get things from there. Yeah, John, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Anna. It's been a pleasure chatting with you
It's
we're going on
yeah.
2 hours now. So
I know, it's crazy. I thought this was gonna be way shorter. I really did. I don't know why, because there's so much to say about all these things.
well,
I'm
see,
not
it's
sure
that
what.
versatility. You can talk about all kinds of racing with me.
Yeah, I guess so. That must be it. See, you're doing well at the self-promotion. You're you may not want to type things on your website, but you're doing well in every other respect, I think.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do it again sometime. We can I'm sure there's I mean, God, there's so many other things we haven't even touched on. We definitely have to do this again.
Well, you know where to find
If
me,
you're amenable.
and I got to
Yeah.
check out a couple of your earlier episodes to see what
Yeah,
other
yeah,
people
you
have to
should.
say.
Yeah, we did have Willie T on. This was a while back. And then actually he is going to be well, okay, I give people a little
There's a good
preview.
man. Willie
Yeah,
T's he's got an opinion or two.
I love him. I love him. He's so
What was the movie called? Uppity.
yes, yes, yes,
It's
which
you know
was
I
good.
realize that's not a flattering term, but he embraces it
Oh
for
yeah, no,
the
I
positive
love
aspects
him.
of it.
I love
Yeah,
him. I will put a link in the show notes for you guys to check out that episode if you haven't. And sneak peek, tentatively, it's not 100% because we have to work out dates and whatever. But Willie is probably going to be back on at some point after Silverstone because he's going to be there in
oh, excellent.
Silverstone for F1 ambassador duties.
Okay,
So yeah, we're gonna probably talk to him again. He's so lovely. He's
yes,
so
yeah.
he's for people just a little behind the scenes. When the first time we had him on, I actually I messaged him on Twitter and I was and then he gave me his cell phone number and I was like, "Are you do you give out your number to random people on the internet as a matter of course?" And he was like, "I'm not afraid."
Well, his son's an expert marksman, so
Right. So I guess I know. And it's very sweet. He posts about him a lot, and it's very nice. Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys for listening and or watching. If you've gotten this far, we really appreciate it. Of course, you can find all the show notes and everything that we talked about either in your description below or in your podcast app. And of course, you can also always go to racingincident.com and find everything there. And again, don't forget to subscribe in all the places if you're not already subscribed. If you came here just for John, which I get it, but check us out the rest of the time.
you need to, as Jim Rome would say, smash that like button.
That's right.
Get subscribe.
Yeah.
Do everything. Support
do all
Anna.
the things.
Yep,
Thank you. Yes, agreed.
But thank you for having me on, and thank you to all who have had the patience to go for 2 hours of me rambling on.
Hopefully lots of people. Yeah, and then that is really it. Oh, if you want to email us, it's racingincidentpod, pod@gmail.com, racingincidentpod@gmail.com. Happy to hear any questions, comments, suggestions you have. Let us know what you thought of this episode or any others. And yeah, that's it. We will talk to you next week after Austria.
I'll be
Bye.
back.